it's in us to be able to heal ourselves. And really, I started this journey because I was burned out with my own energy.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Onion Soup. I'd like to welcome our guest today, Miss Shannon. How are you doing?
So good.
Awesome. I'm really excited to talk to you because you call yourself the Modern Hippie Soul. Is that right? Wait, what is that, and what exactly do you do?
So the name actually originated from my kids' Xbox name back in the day when I was starting my business, and they called themselves the Hippie Punks. And so we were trying to come up with a name, and everyone called me kind of this modern hippie because I am into the hippie stuff, but I also really like my modern life. And it's just deep in my soul where kind of both of these things meet. And so the kids were like, why don't you call it Modern Hippie Soul? At 4 and 6 years old, and then it stuck, and really it just started thriving from there because it was just a really great way to blend both aspects of this life that we live.
Oh, wow. So walk me through your practice because I know you've been doing Reiki for about 20 or so years and that you help women in the corporate world. So how do you utilize Reiki and women in leadership?
Yeah. So I work with both Japanese Reiki, Egyptian Reiki, and I've also apprenticed with a lot of medicine women and amazing shamanic ancient wisdom keepers. And I've been blessed to be able to utilize all of these different techniques just to show people it's our birthright to understand how to work with our own energetic system. We don't have to go on these lavish trips across the world to get this healing. We don't have to pay somebody for this healing. It's in us to be able to heal ourselves. And really, I started this journey because I was burned out with my own energy, and I was recently divorced. I was working a corporate job. I was a single mother of two kids, and I went into the doctor's office because I had cyst on my ovaries and I had pain. And I walked out with a prescription for pain medicine, a prescription for Xanax, and a prescription for antidepressants. And within 2 weeks, I was in the hospital. I couldn't take a sip of water without throwing up. And the doctor, when I went to the ER, brought the medication because I assumed that that was what was causing it. And he asked me if I had any history with antidepressants, and I hadn't. And he told me this is for somebody who's had years of experience on this medication and for somebody who's twice your size. And when I called my primary doctor, he was just kind of very blasé and casual and was like, well, we can, just adjust your dose. And I was like, that sounds awful. No. And so there was kind of this janky little Reiki studio next to the Circle K where I would get my Red Bull. And it just kind of felt this nudge of what do I have to lose? And the first time I went in, it was my hands were on fire. I thought I got stung by a scorpion because I was living in Arizona and I was embarrassed and they already ran my credit card. So I didn't want to leave. And I'm like trying to wash my hand off. And at the time, I didn't know it, but that was really because I was meant to be in that office and I was meant to be working in the healing industry. And really, for Reiki and for energetic healing, it's just relaxing your nervous system. And that's when the internal healing starts to do its work. And so it was interesting because I kept doing the healing, I kept showing up to yoga, I kept doing meditation, but there wasn't really a roadmap. And that was where I kind of struggled. And so it was this unique blend of having my hippie friends, but also still working with corporate. And so my friends that were on this other side of the spectrum were telling me like, oh, you got to release the 3D world, you have to walk away from it and embrace your gifts. I'm like, that's great, but I got 3D bills. Like I have bills to pay and I have kids to support. And as much as I want to walk away from it, I also kind of really love working my job and working in the construction industry. And I can't just walk away from everything, but I also cannot just go to the water cooler and be like, so I have this amazing experience with my spirit guides. And so how do we blend that? And how do we not spend 20 years trying to figure out this journey and this process and working with our own healing and it's almost we go and get that quick fix and it becomes kind of the culture that we have in America. Like we show up to yoga or we go to the gym, but are we really doing the work or are we just showing up? right? And so that kind of became my mission of like, how do I show people to just not spend 20 years wondering and searching and trying to figure out the path to just getting to what it is that's creating this burnout, what it is that's creating lack. And I think as women and men, right, we're in the corporate industry or really just in the world, and we're looking at these external markers. For me, it was I had the right house and the right zip code, and I had the right Louis Vuitton bag, and I had the right car, and my kids were wearing the white clothes, but I was still miserable. I was miserable and I was burned out. And it was because I had all of this stuff inside of me that was unresolved. And that goes back generations, right? It's not just my stuff. And so really that was what led us up to now present time and being able to work with these women, being able to teach them how to manipulate their own energy, working backwards, pulling this up, processing it. And it's just a different way to unpack your crap. For me, traditional therapy didn't work. I was raised in the Catholic Church. That was kind of its own set of problems to unpack. And I still have a deep, deep, deep connection with God. I just needed to step outside of the church to find that. And I did it through this practice and through energetic work and through shamanic practices. So yeah, so that, as they say in the South, it was a long, long walk for a short glass of water.
Wow, I love that. I love how you talk about the birthright actually with all of us healing ourselves. But
Yep.
more importantly, I love the idea of how do you step away from the quote unquote hippie life and then the corporate life. And I think that there's been this big, I don't know, ravine, you know,
Yeah.
that people think you have to go all in into or basically going all in spirituality means that you have to leave the 3D world behind. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, that's not necessarily true. What we're talking about is releasing that attachment to the 3D world. But yeah, like you said, we still have 3D bills. I'm trying not to laugh. I was like, "You're 100% right." You know, so but you did say something that I had never heard before, and when you're talking about the different types of Reiki, you mentioned Egyptian Reiki, and I haven't come across that. So what is Egyptian Reiki?
So it works on the basis of Sekhmet. So her energy, for me, Asui Reiki, I call it kind of like the gateway drug, right? Like it's kind of what gets you in. It's very like stepping into the forest. It's very calming. It's very relaxing. It kind of gets you into the door of this energetic world and you feel stuff, right? Like you do feel things and your body does respond amazingly to that energetic frequency. It's almost like you're tuning in that radio. And then with Sekhmet, and you have to look at, anything that you look in Egyptian pyramids, they've been doing this stuff
Right.
way before any of us even had a concept of it. And Sekhmet just kind of gets in there and I mean, lioness, hear me roar. And I would say it's like you stepped into the forest and then there is like a typhoon that has come into the forest. An example would be like with Reiki, it kind of focuses on the whole energetic system, right? And we're blanketing the energetic system with energetic alignment. And then you come back and then we're kind of fine tuning everything with working. And again, I combined a multitude of different energetic practices, but I did Egyptian Reiki, Sakem with a woman. And a day later, she had reached out to tell me that she was thinking about a dog that she had and how this dog had been with her through all these stages of life, but she'd never really processed the loss of her father, the end of her marriage, how she had moved by herself, right? All of these different places that she had been. And it was just this huge release of emotion, but it wasn't the dog, right? It was just thinking about these places and these huge emotional changes and being able to release it. But it's just that quick change of, getting to the what is it that's holding you back and what's keeping you from releasing these emotions. Whereas with Reiki, a traditional Reiki, it might take you a little bit longer to process that. So it's just I think for me, it's a more complete way to get right to the core, the root of the weed, right? And to pull it out. And then when you combine the two together, it's very, very powerful. And I will say, probably 98% of the people that I combine this technique, not that it's my goal, but I would say there's usually a huge emotional movement, lots of tears. It immediately lifts the floodgates and it just helps you release those emotional blocks. And also with Sekhmet, I feel like it's all about unconditional love. And so we're releasing whatever's holding you back, but we're also bringing in that divine love. And it's like a huge hug. It's a relief because sometimes we're scared to allow that and self-love, right? It's really easy to give love to everyone else. It's often really hard to love ourselves in those moments, right? And to forgive ourselves for how we acted or, just for protecting ourselves. And we have to give ourselves that self-love. And I think that Egyptian Reiki really allows that channel to come down in a really divine way.
Wow. So when we're talking about healing ourselves, and you mentioned SECMA and being able to uproot some of that trauma, how much of that trauma is from past lives or previous generations?
I'm glad you brought that up. So I, it's interesting. And these are things that can stick with us forever. For women, I noticed there's a lot of trauma that's held in our womb space, in our energetic womb. And for women, our energetic womb is essentially from like our root chakra, that pelvic bone, up into where our rib cage meets. So essentially your root chakra up into your solar plexus. So that could be, you think as women, our eggs are developed while we are in
Mhm.
our mother's womb, right? So you think about when our mother was in her mother's womb, that egg was fully developed. So we were essentially in our grandmother's womb, if you can of it in that term, right? And that trauma that's associated while our grandmother was alive and moving down the line, and just the lineages that is associated with that. And so it's interesting when I started doing womb work and clearing of my own womb and thinking about just the past trauma that had been in my own family, and being Italian, we have somewhat of a checkered past. And in Chicago, my grandfather owned four houses. And I knew this growing up. It was just part of, the stories. But when I started clearing that womb space, it was this immediate connection of women were always devalued on my father's side. Women would never be equal to men on my father's side. So the issues with my father stem back really to that point and probably farther because I would never be seen as an equal, right? And so as hard as I worked, as much as I worked, and with him being a narcissist, I would never be seen as a priority. I would never be seen as an equal. I'd never be seen as a shining star because I was always devalued generations ago, right? And so to be able to release that and to clear that, and that's like a very good example of just when you focus on clearing out those generations, there I wouldn't say all of our problems stem from generational traumas, right? Because we all have trauma or issues in each particular timeline, right? And then when you add our own children, there's all these spider webs, like the spider webs, each strand is connected into our own unique timeline. But there's a lot of issues that we carry forward, right? And there's a lot of unresolved things. And we talk about bleeding onto people that didn't cut us. Our parents do that unknowingly, right? And we do that unknowingly. And it's not until there's people like you and I that are ready to feel that and ready to heal that. And people that move into this work with energetic healing or that are ready to work on themselves, that they then look at it and they see the trauma that their mother incurred, the trauma that their father incurred, and then they're ready to heal that and they don't carry that forward. And that's where the generational trauma starts and stops. And it's with those people. And it definitely in this day and age now, right? Because we're ready to look at it a different way. And I see my parents, um, I just send them so much love. And even though I don't talk with my dad, I send him so much love because I see just that trauma that he incurred. And that's not his fault. He was a victim in that too.
Wow. So I want to do a quick deep dive into women's suffrage and women's trauma,
Yeah.
right?
Open your mind and expand your consciousness. Welcome to Chakra Wonders, where style meets soul. Designed to uplift your energy and inspire your path to higher awareness. Every piece is a reflection of the cosmos and the power within you. Explore our collection and discover what resonates with your soul. Visit chakrawonders.com and step into conscious living. Chakra Wonders, conscious style for a conscious world.
So when we look into generational trauma, specifically talking about women.
Yeah.
In our history as humans, there were matriarchal societies.
Yeah.
So at what point did we switch, from your perspective, from a matriarchal society where women were, at the head of the family and so on, and then the trauma starts, and now we have generations of women being devalued?
So I probably have a unique opinion on that because I think that there are parallel timelines, and that's probably a whole other podcast. But, I think millennia ago, I think that you have to look. So let me back up. I think it's the perspective of the women. I think that we have been oppressed for a very long time. But also I think that there is a whole understanding of women and us knowing how to still rule with letting, no offense, with letting men thinking that they're ruling. But I do think that moving from somewhere like Arizona, I did not understand how West Coast Arizona was until I moved to the South. And the shame around our periods, the shame around our sexuality, the shame around miscarriages or abortions, all of that is still very real. And that is so new to me. And that goes back, I mean, God. So, I mean, that you can see it on the HBO shows with, I think it's like the White Snake or the White Rose, or where it talks about how the women really were the ones that were pulling the purse strings and they were the ones that were moving the chess pieces. This goes back probably to the creation because Eve was still blamed for being kicked out of the garden. But women have always had a connection to the earth. Right? And I do think that this womb space is a portal. It is a portal and it is where we create life, we create humanity. But I will say there has to be a balance of feminine and masculine. So to say that, it's all men's fault, I don't agree with that because I think that it takes both of us to come together in unison, and a woman cannot rule the world without that balance of masculine. And you have to take the sexuality out of it, right? Because some people get very in this day and age, people get very opinionated, but just that energy of both, there has to be that balance. But also, it's interesting when you get into some of the teachings with some of the tribes, they do believe that, some of the oceans and the lakes, like that pollution will never clean up, regardless of what we do to clean it up until we release this guilt and the shame that's associated with our womb space. Until we as like humanity clean that up amongst ourselves, it will never clean itself up because it's directly related to us and our portals as women. But also we cannot do that without that counterbalance with the masculine. So I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah,
Um,
no, for sure. I love that actually. That kind of leads me into a topic that's on my mind quite frequently about masculine and feminine energy.
yeah,
And when we look at the spiritual space, spiritual community, it tends to be predominantly women.
yeah.
Why do you think it's predominantly women, and what can we do to get the masculine energy greater in that space? Because I agree with you, we need a balance between masculine and feminine energy.
Yeah. You know, I think it's interesting that you bring that up. And I was talking to somebody about it yesterday. And as a woman that was a single mom for years and years and years, and I met my husband actually shortly after I moved to Nashville. And being a single woman and being the primary caretaker, it is very easy for us as women, if we're taking care of everything and we date a man, to flip those roles. And again, if we take the sexuality out of it, if a masculine role, the masculine role is to give, provide, right? Feminine role is to receive. But if you as a woman are constantly providing for your children, right? You're the caretaker, you can flip that man out of that role and that becomes unbalanced. And I was unbalanced hugely because I work in construction, right? So that's, I mean, out of my feminine all the time because I'm used to instructing men, but also fighting with the masculine. It wasn't until I met a masculine who didn't want to stand on top of me. He wanted to stand next to me, but it also took someone who was very confident in his masculine and his feminine, right? There was no competition. And I think there is a huge issue with both masculine and feminine, right? Feminine, we're constantly taught to be competitive. We're
Mm,
constantly taught to look at another woman and she has a nicer dress, she's skinnier, or she's prettier, her hair looks nicer. There's always that competition from a very young age that we're taught. Men, the same thing. He's stronger, his car's nicer, his girlfriend's prettier. There's always that competition. But if we just take a minute and be confident within ourselves and our abilities within ourselves. So when I came into union with my husband, there was just such a sense of calm and I didn't have to compete. And there was just this whole sense of balance. And really my spiritual practice just exploded here where I'm at now. And I was able to evolve and to grow he's actually coming with me to Peru to participate in a shaman's journey, but he supports that. And he's so supportive and he's so amazing. And it has nothing to do with, him being out of his masculine. He's confident in his masculine. And I think as we grow more confident in who we are and we take the competition and we realize that these external markers of success, that it's not about the money, it's not about the house, it's not about the looks or the muscles or whatever it is that we're trying to measure success. It's about what's inside. And we see more people becoming aware of that. I think that's when we see more people coming into the spiritual practice. And I see people shedding these roles and shedding what they had previously assumed was what made them successful and what made them who they are. Because at the end of the day, you can strip all of that stuff away, right? Who are you after that? And it's unique to see even some of the men come into some of these workshops and they want to receive womb clearing. And yeah, let's do that because it balances that energy out. But women too, because I suffered from it. Yeah, I'm totally masculine in a lot of senses, but it's also knowing when to balance that out. And so I hope as we grow in these practices and people like you and me engage in these conversations, it's not about competition. It's not about your motorcycle or your car or your muscles, because I went through that phase. And those men were boys that I chewed up and spit out. But they'll never evolve because they're looking at the wrong thing. You know what I mean? And I just see this beautiful balance happening now because we're looking at things from a totally different, like we've just shifted the perspective a little bit to see what it really means to be human and to exist on this earth. It has nothing to do with what we thought it did 10, even 5 years ago, right?
mm. Wow, I love that. So, as a mother, how do you instill those values into your children, and how can other women do the same?
Man, that's hard, especially because I have a teenage daughter and everything they say about teen girls is real. Like every meme that you see on social media is real and it fluctuates from moment to moment. And it's hard too because some of these girls are just vicious and I will say that they're vicious, but also that starts at home and it starts with like our phones. Like these kids see these things on their phone and I have to a take a breath as much as mama bear wants to come in and protect her cubs, but also, when my kids come home and they tell me stories about children getting in these knockdown drag out fights at 7:30 in the morning, like they came in hot, but also what do you think their life was like? Because when we're all pissed off and we're angry and we're ready to fight, it's because something else happened, right? Something triggered us. We're not just angry. It's because something else happened and that's a response, right? So what is their life like at home? How did they go to bed? How did they wake up? Like they had something else happening and send them compassion because that sucks for them. And, we've hit some bumps in the road and we've really evolved as a family and grown tighter because of some pretty awful things that have happened. And so to experience that and to be able to look at that outwardly, right? And see just extend compassion. When somebody is angry and bitter, it's because most likely they're jealous and then they see how loving we are and how connected. They don't have that at home. And you can pick up on that energy. And I think both of my kids are pretty sensitive and they're receptive. And to be able to help them identify what is your crap and what somebody else's crap, right? And how to just send out love. I think a lot of people focus on blocking energy, right? Block it, block it, block it. It's going to come back to you, but let's transmute it. Let's just be a filter, absorb it, send it back out with love. And if something really sticks with you, which I'm really big about. Let's give it back to the earth. Let's give it back to God to compost it for something better. Because if we block it, it's just going to go back out to somebody else. But in this day and age, post election and all of the negativity, the powers that be, if we keep bickering with each other, everybody else is one. But like, we create our own reality. So do you want it to be good or do you want it to be great? And especially right now, just with the crisis of guns, the crisis with mental health, it's you have to create your own reality. And that's really the main focus that we have here in this house. And also, I think a really big thing, even being in energy work and working with women and volunteering my time with, rehab centers for women, it's okay to ask for help. I don't have all the answers, and let's find somebody that can help, because I think sometimes we think we have to have all the answers. We don't, but we have resources, and it's okay to find those resources because we feel better. Like, I can't do it all. There's billions of people on this earth. One energy practitioner does not have the capacity for it all. My healing's very different from probably your healing or somebody else's. So let's find the right one, right? There's no reason to be competitive. Like, I love all the healing, like all the healers. Let's heal everyone, because that's what we're here to do.
I 100% love that, and I agree. I think that and I don't really find that in the spiritual space that there's this idea of lack, because most of us believe in abundance, and there's so much out there that there's
Yeah.
no need for competition. We're talking about women and women's suffrage and there being a matriarchy before, and you mentioned how, well, you think there are multiple realities. One, what are the multiple realities, and how does this dive into women's suffrage?
So a long time ago, when I had started my energetic journey, I had a very strong download, we could call it, of this universal chord of life. And how it was explained to me was essentially this rope of the universe. And while this rope was one singular rope, each strand, that was each soul, each person, is singular, contributing to the whole. And within each strand is a unique life. And even though there is one soul, there could be three or four or five or 100 lives that is attached to that soul, still contributing to the main rope, if that makes sense and you're following me. Within those strands of the rope, and this will make sense in a second, you can go in between those strands and you can see how those strands of the rope fall together. This was information that was given to me, I would say probably about 10 years ago. And then I would say probably about a year ago, someone gave me a past life regression, which, if you've not had one, it's insane. And stuff was coming out of my mouth that I had never even heard of before or understood. And I had articulated kind of the same thing that I had visualized. And then shortly after that, I met a woman that I was studying with, and she said along the same lines that you can slip in between these chords and you can see just how these lives match up. And so you and I can look, slightly different, or we can look exactly the same. And so you can see different versions of your life, how it splits off. And it's interesting too, when I do my energy work, I see our chords connect almost like a DNA strand. And so you see how that version of a life can twirl up and connect into our life. And that's how my energy work happens and transpires, but also how those strands can then go into different directions, right? Through energy work that I've done on myself and going back into karmic cycles, right? With my own family history that we've talked about, and just kind of purging it, right? Wringing the rag, so to speak, of negative energy and purifying that, because there was some just some negative stuff that happened, but being able to bring purified energy, clean energy, energy of love forward, that in itself released for me Kundalini energy that I was able to then give to my daughter, which then changes her timeline, it changes her cord, changes her strand. And I've seen this happen with other people. And because on this planet, we are given free choice, free will, and you and I can have a very beautiful path right now. That could all change tomorrow, and we could decide to go a very different way. And that this life, there could be another strand that's parallel to our life where we could be very different people. And it's interesting because I've taken my kids go with me to all sorts of metaphysical psychic fairs. And before I really understood this concept, I've had at least 4 psychics tell me that my daughter and I will flip timelines. Like she will have an experience as my mother, and then I'm her daughter, and we flip flop throughout timelines just to experience what it's like as the other person, which makes sense because she's very much the mother hen, which is frustrating as crap because sometimes like she's a really great cook and she cleans, but also I don't want to argue with you, just pick up your clothes off the floor. And so that was how I understood it. And when I listened to other people explain it, it's almost similar concepts, but how they're angels, their guides, however it's shown to them, almost like Legos or Tetris. And it's things that just stack up against each other. And I'm sure you could probably ask 20 more people and they would tell you 20 different ways. So I'm curious of how you understand it.
Wow, that's really interesting. So lately, I've been diving more into quantum physics and particle mechanics, and I've been really interested in something called the Copenhagen interpretation, as well as the many worlds theory. And both of
Yep.
them talk about how a particle exists in what's called a superposition, and it literally exists everywhere at the exact same time. It's not until, well, from one interpretation, the Copenhagen interpretation, it's not until it's observed that we do what's called collapse that wave function, and then it physically materializes in our world. But in the many worlds interpretation or many worlds theory, it talks about the multiple realities and how this particle literally exists anywhere and everywhere. And it's when you look at it that you're just observing that one particular reality. So
Yep.
when we look at that from and this is quantum mechanics. This isn't talking about the spirituality of it, right?
Yeah.
So when we look at that and then we cross that with spirituality and consciousness, it's it shows us, or at least it's been showing me, that there really are multiple realities, multiple worlds, and we just tune in to one at a time, and there are different frequencies. And my next question is, with there being multiple realities and being able to basically tune in to different frequencies of those realities, how does that interact with materializing things into our world, such as manifestation and the law of attraction?
I I do believe that there is a frequency aligned with that. And I didn't believe it until have you heard of Abraham Hicks? So I remember when someone told me about that, and I'm like, okay, let's listen to aliens being channeled by a woman that sounds like the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. But then when I listened to it, and I tried it a little bit. Let me just change the frequency. Let me see what it feels like to not be in a world full of bills and not be in a world full of sorrow and be in a world that I'm able to think about having enough money in my bank account. And I will 100% hands down on a Bible say within months, I was able to achieve a promotion. Within months, I was able to push out a lot of the BS in my life, but it's also changing that mindset. And I will say, even with energy work and the women that I work with, it's not magic. It is mindset, right? It is mindset. And I think that's what the powers that be don't want us to realize. It is our mindset. If we're constantly told that we have to go through these certain gateways to get to a certain goal, right? Then we will always think that we have to go to college, we have to make this amount of money, right? We don't. A really great example when I moved to Nashville, um, it was shortly after I'd done a lot of work with a shaman and I received a lot of energetic transmissions to change what's called my rainbow body. And it's essentially it's the same as what you Reiki, but just in a more ancient kind of shamanic way. And just being in that frequency of pure love and pure abundance and just having this joy in my heart. And when we moved here, it was rough. It was right when COVID happened, everything was locked down. I manifested brand new mattresses for my kids. I manifested furniture for free, manifested instantly. And it's interesting how these things happened. And long story short, working for the hotel, they had changed brands. So each hotel has to have a model room made, and then they changed brands. Well, all this brand new stuff is no longer useful. And so they're like, well, do you want it? And I'm like, yeah, I want an $800 mattress. I mean, brand new linen, everything. And it was, I mean, as a single mom, yeah, it's a huge relief, but also to just, I think people think that, when you manifest, there's just going to be a new Ferrari in your yard. No. And I think also something that's important to know when you were talking about manifesting, because some people are like, well, I meditated $1 million. I meditated. You can say that you want a cake. The universe will walk you into the kitchen with all the ingredients to make a cake. It is up to you to make that cake, right? And so when we talk about this mindset of manifestation, where are you aligned? Are you aligned to the mindset of just holding your hand out? Are you aligned to the mindset of, I'm going to make this happen because I believe in myself and I am worthy to make this happen and I am worthy of this life? Or am I worthy of just waiting and holding my hand out? Because those are two very different frequencies. And I think when you tap into looking at these parallel lives, and if you had a life as a beggar, right, and a panhandler, is that a life that is now trickling into this life? And how do we resolve that? How do we release that? Because sometimes people get stuck. Or did you have a life as maybe you lived in a rich family and you're constantly used to just having somebody hand stuff out to you, because you can be stuck in both of those frequencies, which are two very different realities, right? And so it's interesting when you get into a past life regression, how those are two very different lives, but also two very real ways that can keep you stuck in this present reality. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. It's so interesting. I never actually thought about it that way because you're right. Being a
Not
beggar
like, yeah, I'm right, but
but but being a beggar with your hand out versus coming from a wealthy family where everything's given to you are two different things. However, they're along the same path of the same frequency. So exactly what are you resonating with? That's
yeah,
wonderful. And the other thing you said is the analogy about going to the kitchen and making a cake, because a lot of times people will want to manifest a ton of physical finances and things like that, but they're expecting it to magically appear into their bank account. And it's
yeah,
not that that can't happen. It's more likely that the universe will show you how you can go achieve that and how you can
yeah,
bring that into your life, but people tend to ignore that. So how do
yeah.
you tune in to knowing these messages that the universe is giving you?
For me, I'm all about the path of least resistance, right? Working with women, and especially working with women in corporate, energetically, I don't for me, it doesn't feel authentic to try and peddle, for lack of better words, Reiki session after Reiki session, because for me, I don't think that it is, I just don't feel that it best serves the people that I want to work with. I want people to learn how to work with their own energy. And I want to teach you, what does it feel like to have an unbalanced root chakra, and how do you manipulate that own energy, and what are the feelings and the physical manifestations that come from that, and how do we harness that, and where do we see that in the corporate world and in your personal life, and let's tap into that unbalance and work forward. I just don't think that it makes sense for me to hope that people come into my Reiki practice and I give them this one treatment and they want to come back. And so for me, doing that previously felt stuck, and it felt like I was going against the grain, right? And so I really had to sit and think, what do I want my Reiki, what do I want my practice to feel like? And it wasn't just a traditional Reiki practice. It was more of what I call myself, an energetic coach, a holistic practitioner, because I have, the Reiki, I have the shamanism, I have the ancient wisdom that I pull into that. And I think when people, want to build a car washing business, or, have, their amazing acre, you have to look at what feels authentic for you. And if you look at, an Instagram influencer and that's your model, is that authentic to you? Maybe it is. I don't know. But I think that the curse of our day and age right now is the phone, is social media, and we're trying to grasp for something that isn't true to us. And so for me, it really was just kind of pulling back. And what is it that I want to be? What do I see myself doing? I see myself working with powerful women. I see myself working with women who want to combine what I did and live the life that I want to live. That, yes, I can still go to the day spa and I can still wear clothes from the mall. And, as much as I love locally sourced, I still also like to express myself through makeup and fashion. And I also really love energetic work and healing and tapping into the power of the moon and women's circles and combining that life, right, into this modern world. And those are the women that I want to, reach out to. And it's not throwing out this net and hoping to capture everyone. It's a very specific niche, but also that's what works for me. And I think that sitting, trusting that innate intuition, that divine intuition, that's that, I think, that universal wisdom. And that's what works. That's, I think, the trust. That's divine guidance, but not forcing it. And I think when you force it, when you look at something with the end game of making money, that's usually when that failure happens, because you're looking at the financials. And obviously, we're all here to make money, right? Again, we have 3D bills. But if you're doing something that is not, especially in this line of work, if you're doing it for something for financial gain because you have to do 5 or 6 or 7 Reiki treatments in a day to make your end quota, you're not doing your work honestly. You have to hustle. And that's not what I want to do.
Wow, I love that. And you're talking about the feeling the intuition, feeling the energy around you. And you mentioned earlier how this isn't magic, but it's a mindset shift. And that's
Yeah.
what the powers that be don't want us to know. Fun fact, when I first got into doing this and decided to be an entrepreneur and businessman, I was reading a lot of spiritual books alongside entrepreneurial books. And
Yeah.
everyone who's an entrepreneur should or has read Think and Grow Rich. And
Yep.
that entire book is about shifting your mindset. And this is a entrepreneur book, it's a business book, it's not spiritual, but it's about shifting your mindset. So I want to dive more into how this isn't magic and how it truly is about changing your mind. And then why is that challenging for
I have a lot of answers for that.
people?
I think it's a challenge because from a very young age, we are programmed, right? We are programmed, I'll say it, in the church. We are programmed in our family. We are programmed in society, in our culture. We're we are programmed to be a hustle culture, right? So we are predestined for burnout. If you have time to lean, you have time to clean, no pain, no gain. That's just how we were raised. You're told that you will never be successful if you don't go to college. You have to work 9 to 5. For me, I wore my exhaustion as like this badge of honor. Like for me, it was like, look at me. Like I have these kids and my house is spotless and I don't need a house cleaner. And yes, my face has fallen into the couch on my laptop, but hey, I'm doing all the damn things. But for what? For what? You know what I mean? To not spend time with my family? That's stupid. That's why I'm a mother, because I want to be a mother, not to show that I can be. You know what I mean? But we're told that that's what we're supposed to do. And I think because that's you have to have this house and you have to have this purse and you have to have this car, and for what? For what? And I think that's where nobody's really answered. What does it show? What is it showing? And I think it probably was like in my late 30s, took a step back and I was like, what am I doing this for? And then you look at these other countries where, 30 days of vacation is the norm. And they tell you, yeah, you need to take time off, or like even maternity leave. Like we're one of the only countries that does not just give maternity leave. I think it's like Mongolia or something. They give 2 years of maternity leave. Like your body is a train wreck, but hey, I'm going to need you to answer this email. But that's just, I think, the American culture to look at that. And so it's not even a matter, I don't think we're given an opportunity to change our mindset because it's so ingrained, but also we need to work so we can give money to all of these other countries and pay off the debt and make the wheels go around. And I don't know if this is the podcast for that conversation, but we are almost enslaved to pay off debt for everything else. And we look at what it is that we work for, and we're taxed out of our paycheck. And then we're taxed at the register when we buy food, and we're taxed when we buy gas. And what's left? And even, I look at the income that my husband and I make, and then what's left, I'm like, Jesus, it's embarrassing, but we're not making bad money, right? We're not. But that's also the mindset, right? What are we going to do to change this? And like, where do we make our own changes? And do we allow ourselves to be slaved by that? No, I'm not going to. And how do we change the way we live? And do I answer to things like the government? Do I allow myself to be consumed by the media that tells me that this is the end all be all and it's never going to get any better? That's the mindset shift, I think. I think getting onto social media, especially after the week we just had with the elections, I mean, I had to check out, right? For mental health reasons, for energetic reasons. You can't let yourself be consumed by that. But also, you can't solve the entire world's problems. What are we going to do in my house, at my doorstep? I'm going to work on myself. I'm going to change what it is that I can change. I see myself making a certain amount of money. I see myself living a certain lifestyle, and even for some of the people that want to be a millionaire flying on a private plane, I look at the lifestyle of family members. And when I was living that lifestyle with them and I was miserable, that was probably some of the most depressed times that I had. And did the money make me happy? It didn't at all. It was probably some of the most depressed, unhappy times that I had. So what mindset shift in what direction is good for you too, I think is important to touch base on.
I love that. I think it's important for when people want to manifest $1,000,000. I think it's important to look at why you feel that you need $1,000,000 and why you want to manifest that. A
Yep.
lot of times you might need that to take your business specifically to a certain level. But if it's just for, as you said earlier, personal gain, then you probably don't need as much money as you think you do.
Yeah.
People just settle on that $1,000,000 number.
Yeah.
Say, no, most people survive off of, 80K a year. So you probably
More
don't.
money, more problems.
Exactly, you probably don't need as much as you think you do. But Shannon, I wanna thank you for coming on again for a second go around. Is there anything you wanna leave the audience before we go?
I just feel like I'm in love with your audience and I'm in love with your podcast. And thank you for having me on for a second time.
Also, thank you so much, and thank you everyone for watching this episode of Onion Soup. Hope you have a great rest of your day.